Hello and welcome into the New Zealand Cricket Show here on Global Cricket Radio. I'm your host, Andrew McLean, and it's my pleasure to welcome my co-host, Adam Bell, along. Adam, who's just, it's coming up to 4, it's just past 5 o'clock in New Zealand, and it's the last day of the year. And it was, I guess, the last day of the international cricket season in New Zealand. And New Zealand managed to win something, Adam. Finally.
Yes, yes. Albeit it was a very scratchy win for the Black Caps. Um, and a bit of a shame that New Zealand couldn't finish the job, and rain ended up coming hitting. Excuse me, hitting Bay Oval, and it was a DLS at the end of it. But I mean, with 18 runs, I think it was required. I mean, and Neesham and Santner at the crease, it was going to be a um, pretty full on conclusion, but it would have nice to have seen them actually get home and do the job for the Black Caps.
Yeah, so just for those of you that may not have caught the scorecard, or if you've been under a rock or something, so this was the third T20, and I guess the relevant thing for Bangladesh is that before the match started, they couldn't lose the series. The best they could do was win it, of course, or they could draw it, which is a first for Bangladesh in this format of the match in New Zealand. But anyway, they were bowled out for 110, so probably um, one of their worst performances actually with the bat. And as Adam said, New Zealand got home on Duckworth Lewis at 95 for 5. Um, but Adam, what would you say about today's match? I mean, let's start with the Bangladesh innings. 110. That's off not was it 19? Well, almost the whole overs actually. They almost batted the whole overs. It was 19.2 overs. Um, a better performance by New Zealand or a worse performance by Bangladesh? How would you assess that first innings?
A little bit of both, to be honest. I think New Zealand winning the toss on that pitch was an advantage, but I mean to only score 110 runs in a T20 game is criminal. Really, you're not going to win too many matches scoring that little. So I thought from a Bangladeshi point of view, they just could not get going. And if you just look through the scorecard, I mean, 10, 17, 16, 14, 9, 4, and 10. All their batsmen, apart from, you know, three got double figures. Um, they just couldn't get going. And then I think in T20 cricket, like all cricket, you need someone who's got to start to go on, and they just didn't have anybody today that could go on and get a significant score. And as a result, they only scored 110 runs. I thought from a New Zealand point of view, I think there's some very very positive signs. I think Ben Sears bowled exceptionally well. He bowled some rockets, got some deliveries close to 150 Ks. So
Wow.
he's shown that he's someone for the future for the Black Caps. And we've all known that he's got a lot of pace, and around the traps he's been talked about as as a potential Black Cap, and obviously in this series he's been given a good run. I think what's been positive is the way he's been able to bowl with not only good pace but good control as well. So hopefully he gets more opportunities for the Black Caps, not only this summer but going forward. Um, in terms of other bowlers, I think like Mitchell Santner again. I mean, he got 4 wickets, and the thing is with Mitchell Santner, he's a type of guy that really takes advantage of situations where if a top order's lost wicket. So if teams try to attack him, that's when he really comes into his own. And if you're able to remove the top order, he's coming into guys who obviously playing with scoreboard pressure, and that's when he can really put the clamps on, and that's what he did today.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at that scorecard, Santner's first wicket that he took was the number 4 batsman. So yeah, numbers 1, 2, and 3 fell to the pace bowlers. Saka was LBW to Southey for 4. Talukdar was LBW Sears for 10, and the captain Shanto was caught Finn Allen bowled Adam Milne for 17. So yeah, not a lot of runs, and not at a great rate either. So I suppose in that sense, Santner kind of came on at the perfect time, and we've seen so many times recently that he often get cooked. Well, I'm thinking back to like the World Cup, for example. He gets called upon to do more of a defensive job when Rohit's smashing the ball all around the ground or something like this.
Absolutely.
Whereas this suited him perfectly, as you say, Adam. And I mean, but nonetheless, I mean, you can say that it suited him perfectly, but you still got to do your job as a bowler. I mean, and 4 overs, 4 for 16. That's a pretty impressive return. And I know that Ish Sodhi didn't take any wickets, but he had basically an identical analysis: 4 overs, no maidens, none for 16. So I mean, as best, I mean, I'm not as close to it as you are, Adam. You're back in New Zealand watching these matches, but just when you look at a scorecard like that, it looks like possibly New Zealand's most comprehensive bowling effort for quite some time actually. What was the wicket like? Was it well and truly in New Zealand's favour? Because I know that there's been a lot of rain in Mount Maunganui recently. Did that was that a factor in the match today?
Well, there was some assistance early on, and I think Tim Southey, really took full advantage. I mean, he got Sumo Saka LBW really early on, and I think the Seamers really enjoyed the conditions at Bay Oval. And as we've just discussed, New Zealand got rid of the top order from Bangladesh, and then once Santner comes into the attack, it's that middle order that then has to play catch up, and the guys like Shanta and Sumo Saka, they're really important cogs in this Bangladeshi side, and New Zealand were able to get them out really early.
So anyway, I guess it was a game that it was sort of New Zealand's to lose, really, wasn't it? And probably the only thing that was going to stop them losing was a massive collapse. And when you look at the scorecard of Seifert out for 1, Mitchell out for 1, Glenn Phillips out for 1, and Mark Chapman out for 1, you think, which is what I did. So I wasn't watching the match. I couldn't get it on TV here in Bali. You think, that's a pretty sorry looking scorecard. But actually, the 4th wicket fell when they were on 38. So when Chapman got out, they were actually on 38. So whilst the wickets were tumbling, Finn Allen was rattling on some runs at the other end. And I see he actually managed to get past the power play for the first time in about 18 innings today. How did he bat?
Look, I think Finn Allen, very early on was obviously very hyper aggressive, and I think his strike rate that he ended up on was 122. He got 38 off 31, but very early on he was a lot more aggressive. But I think once the wicket started to tumble, he did rein himself in a little bit, which was good to see, and we know that he's had a lot of pressure on him, particularly from fans who think that he's not quite ready to cement himself in the Black Cap side. And he's had a pretty poor series to date. I think I was reading a stat that in his last 18 T20s he's averaged under 20 with the bat. So I think it was a innings that he really needed today. Unfortunately, he couldn't go on and do the job, getting bowled by Shariful Islam. But I think there were some encouraging signs for Finn Allen, because we know the kind of power that he possesses. He's a very talented cricketer, but I think for him it's just trying to figure out his role in the Black Cap side. And also, I feel as if Finn Allen's the kind of guy who sometimes doesn't understand that he can rein himself in and still be a really effective batsman. I think he's a player that I feel feels the pressure to be scoring at 150 plus strike rate all the time when sometimes that situation is not always needed?
Yeah, yeah, I get the same feeling, and it doesn't really matter what form of the game is. It doesn't matter what form of the game you're playing. If you're opening the batting, it yes, it's about scoring runs quickly. But I think again, I use the example of Rohit Sharma. In the Cricket World Cup 50 over format. I mean, he smashed about 500 runs or something, but he wasn't getting out for tens and twenties. He was getting out for 40s and 50s and 60s. And I think that New Zealand fans would be happy if Finn Allen, could deliver those sorts of returns. But yeah, good to see him make 38 today. That actually proved really valuable in the end. Before Neesham came in and Santner along with him, 28 not out and 18 not out respectively to sort of get New Zealand to where they needed to be when the rain came down. Neesham's reliable though, isn't he? I mean, I struggle to remember a match when Neesham didn't perform with the bat. I mean, he always seems to perform with the bat, no matter what, and it kind of reminds me of a comment I heard on the TV commentary about Mitchell Marsh, is that the game situation doesn't seem to affect Marsh's approach, and I kind of feel like Neesham's the same.
Yeah, Neesham's a real clutch player, isn't he? Especially at the death, and I've got some very vivid memories of times when he's performed for the Black Caps. And remember the 2019 World Cup in England when he was such a clutch player. I think we need to remember that he bowled fantastically well in the final against England as well at the death, and he was one of the reasons why England didn't go on and win that game, because he bowled superbly at the death. And then even think about the super over when he hit Jofra Archer for a six, the second ball of the super over. There's little moments like that. His catch against India, his bowling throughout that tournament, his fielding throughout that tournament.
What about his runs against Australia in the last World Cup?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The T20 World Cup as well. Remember, he was batting with Daryl Mitchell, and England at one point looked favourites to win that game, and he just came out and played an incredible innings and smashed Chris Jordan all around the park. So, he's just a guy that just seems like he loves those very pressure moments, and even with the ball. I mean, it was that T20 against Pakistan earlier this year where Iftikhar Ahmed was smashing the ball all over the place, and it looked like Pakistan were going to get home. But Jimmy Neesham came on. I think got clattered for a couple of sixes, but then got a wicket. So he's just been known to do this in his career, and I think he will go down in New Zealand cricket history as a guy that, though he hasn't fulfilled his talent in both disciplines, as a guy that's given so much to the Black Caps.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Well, I guess it was quite a long time ago when he scored that nice 100 as well against India in the match when Brendan McCullum got all those runs in Wellington a number of years ago. But I guess he's kind of specialised, shall we say, as a limited overs player in recent times. But anyway, Neesham and Santner got New Zealand home. Mitchell Santner was player of the match. And the 3-match series, or the one-day series, was drawn 1-1. Player of the series was the left-arm opening bowler, Shoriful Islam. So I suppose the first question is, well, it's kind of hard to say, isn't it, when you've got one match rained out and then you've only got two others. But, my impression is, looking on from afar, and I've listened to a bit of it on the radio as well during this series, is that obviously Bangladesh has done extraordinarily well to, beat New Zealand in that last one-dayer, comprehensively thrash us by 9 wickets before Christmas, and then beat us again the other night, and became very close again today, as you say, with all those early wickets, if it wasn't for Neesham, we might have been looking at another defeat. I mean, what does it say, Adam, about the state of New Zealand cricket that Bangladesh has come to New Zealand and had so much success?
I'm first going to discuss this T20 series. I tweeted out something actually earlier and during New Zealand's innings that this performance and the series shows how much New Zealand needs Kane Williamson and Conway in the T20 side. Those type of players are invaluable. I think a lot of people have the perception with T20 cricket that it's all about fours and sixes. Where I disagree with that notion. I think you need balance in a T20 side. And I think with having Finn Allen and Tim Seifert, they are very explosive players, but they aren't kind of guys that have that kind of game awareness or the batting skill of Kane Williamson or Devon Conway. So you do need those guys in a T20 side. And I think this series highlighted how valuable Conway and Kane Williamson are. And you hear some people talk about, but they don't strike it, 150 per 100 balls and all this kind of stuff. And not, the typical big hitters. But you only have to look at how well Devon Conway bats in the IPL. You only have to see Kane Williamson career in the IPL at times. I think there's one season where Kane Williamson was the top run scorer in the IPL for Sunrisers Hyderabad. So, we need to look at these guys and understand how important they are to the T20 side. Yes, it's great having the explosive Finn Allens, some Seiferts, Phillips, Chapman, Neesham, etc. But you do need some batsmanship around them.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is that Daryl Mitchell batting at 3, and I know he's massively versatile. It wasn't that long ago when he played that extraordinary knock. Was it to beat England? I think it was in the T20 World Cup in the UAE.
In Dubai. Yep.
Yeah, in Dubai. He scored 80 odd not out opening, so he can bat everywhere. But honestly, if I was picking a New Zealand side at home at this time of the year, the main holiday season, I mean, Mitchell at 3, it just doesn't sound right to me. And obviously, that's mainly because Williamson was taken out of the side. He's not officially injured or anything like that. They just decided not to play him. But I guess that begs the other question, Adam. As a New Zealand fan, it's slightly embarrassing that we've had a couple of losses to Bangladesh, in the ODI and then also in the first T20. Not exactly a great performance today either. I mean, should we be putting out a better side? I mean, Conway's being rested. He's definitely not injured. He's just not playing. Should we be playing our best players?
Look, that's a tough one. I mean, these guys play so much cricket these days, and bilateral T20s and ODI series have become really the places or the place to blood new players. When I was growing up, and when you were growing up as well, when we watched ODI cricket, we knew well in advance basically who the best 11s for each country were, give or take a couple of players. Like, we had that in our minds. We knew the best players in the world. We had that understanding that when there was an ODI match on that would be played between the best players from both countries. Now it's not like that at all. I mean, and you have series to series where players are rested, and there is a lot of cricket. Not all players play in all T20 leagues around the world as well, which is actually an interesting side note to this as well. So I think there are occasions where maybe players are just rested when they don't need to be. I think in terms of Kane Williamson, there's probably the thought of getting his fitness back before playing even more competitive cricket. Devon Conway has played a lot of cricket this year. IPL, played in the 100, played in the MLC, played in the World Cup, obviously, and then in the Test series in Bangladesh. So I don't see an issue with resting him, but I would assume that Kane Williamson and Devon Conway will be in the T20 side to play against Pakistan starting in a couple of weeks' time. I genuinely think, though, and I think this is also from just the fan perspective as well, that we all thought New Zealand was going to completely dominate Bangladesh in both the ODI series and the T20 series. And I think full credit to Bangladesh, they've really performed exceptionally well because they're missing some key players as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Rakib Al Hassan's not over here. He's the greatest cricketer that they've ever produced. So, look, you've got to give them absolute credit. And I think this gives Bangladesh a lot of confidence going forward that they can beat New Zealand in New Zealand. I remember when Sri Lanka first tipped up New Zealand in the 90s, and before then New Zealand had dominated Sri Lanka and New Zealand. And after they won that test series, they had a lot of self-belief, and it kind of turned the corner for them. So, I think Bangladeshi cricket, they'll know that they can beat New Zealand in New Zealand.
Well, and I guess we always go back to that test match at Bay Oval. We always think it was last year, but it's actually almost 2 years ago now. But yeah, they've been phenomenal in New Zealand. They've just performed outstandingly, and which are pretty foreign conditions. There's a big difference between Mirpur and Tauranga. But yeah, well played to Bangladesh. I mean, just from my angle though, if I was the CEO of New Zealand cricket right now, I'd be calling up Gary Stead and saying, why on earth are you not putting out a decent team to try and win a series? And it just seems to me that, and even fans, and I know you run a big Facebook group. There's about 6,500 people in it, and I think even the fans don't seem to care anymore. It's not that they don't care, but they sort of somehow have bought into the fact that it's okay to lose, and that really rubs me up the wrong way.
I think that's an interesting one, Andrew, because I mean myself, right, especially with T20 cricket, I feel as if T20 cricket, an individual match is part of a subset. So I think losing the odd game, if you don't win the series, I think there's an issue. I think, but losing the odd game doesn't seem to be the problem. And I think Jimmy Neesham the other night in his post-match interview kind of alluded to that. They weren't really concerned about losing a game. Well, it happens. Me and you, we grew up in an era where bilateral matches meant something. Every bilateral match, whether it was New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand, Pakistan, every game.
They weren't even called bilateral matches.
No, they weren't. No, they weren't. They weren't. Absolutely. But every game, every tour felt like something. And I think that's another side issue, is that, when Australia came here, they'd come here for, 3 tests and 3 ODI matches, or, England would do the same. So it was a complete series.
Yeah.
And every match felt important. We're now, I mean, there's so much cricket going on. Teams come here with understrength teams, and New Zealand go to other countries with understrength teams, and it doesn't feel the same as it was when we were growing up. But I do understand that the landscape of cricket has changed. I feel like we're going down a football model where everything is about the World Cups, and then everything in between is about blooding players for the World Cup. And you see that with football, we have friendly matches, and you look at the 11s from both teams, and it's like, well, these aren't the strongest teams, but fans just accept it. Will cricket fans accept it? I don't know long term whether we will. I think there's a sentiment around fans, especially us older guys, who are kind of getting a bit sick of seeing half-baked teams turning up. But also, we need to understand that these guys are playing so much cricket these days that it's probably unsustainable.
Speaking of half-baked teams turning up, have you seen the side that South Africa is going to bring for the Test series in February?
I have. To be honest, I'm surprised that they're even able to put together that team. It boggles me how much debt there is in South African cricket that you can basically eliminate the top 40 players and still come up with a team that have got 4 guys that have got international experience. Because I know that if it happened to the scenario happened to a New Zealand side, I don't think our depth would go that far. So for them to even have guys like Dwayne Olivier and Hamza and Keegan Peterson, who played Test cricket a couple of years ago, to even bring those guys over is incredible in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I was digging around for an article that Neil Manthorpe wrote at the end of November, and I'd read it at the time, and he was talking about some players that could potentially play, and one of the guys that he picked out was a guy Villiers. I forget what his first name was, but basically he'd stopped playing cricket and he just started playing cricket again. And Neil was saying, well, there's a pretty good chance he might make the Test side now. Turns out he didn't make it, but yeah, I don't know. Look, I'm massively disappointed about this South African side that's coming. I mean, the danger for New Zealand, of course, though, is that we don't win in a series, which we clearly should win. But we know what happened last time South Africa came to New Zealand. They had 2 weeks in quarantine in some hotel somewhere in Auckland or something. Lost the first match and then gave us a good beating in the second match. So, these South Africans, they'll be up for it. So New Zealand's in a bit of a it's not a great position to be in when you're going to be expected to give the tourists a hiding, but you sort of don't really know what might happen. But Adam, just as an aside, what do you think about New Zealand's cricket's decision not to move this? Cricket South Africa requested that they move the series, and the reason why South Africa's sending an understrength side is because of its own domestic competition, which Cricket South Africa says that takes priority over anything else. Do you think New Zealand should have been a bit more flexible in shifting the dates of this tour?
That's a really interesting question, because at the end of the day, it is South Africa's cricket responsibility to ensure that they have a T20 competition that doesn't clash with a Test series, or that the players are available for the Test series. So I understand where Cricket South Africa are coming from, and we all know that these domestic leagues are a revenue source for them as well, and we think about that the IPL owners now own some of the teams in South Africa. So I understand why they would want their best players to play for the full duration of the tournament. But I mean, to send basically a C team over is disgraceful. From a New Zealand cricket perspective, I mean, look, there's not a lot of wiggle room in the schedule at the moment. The IPL is scheduled for what late March. And then you've obviously got the Australians coming over here in February. So I don't really know how much wiggle room there would have been. I think South Africa put that request through, but there was just not enough room in the calendar to juggle things around. So, it's
but it is quite interesting, though, isn't it? That on the one hand, we're being a bit critical of South Africa for prioritising their domestic tournament, and and because and let's face it, it's not like the schedule was unknown. It's just they said, well, we're supposed to be playing in New Zealand in February, but unfortunately we can't do it because we've got a home tournament to play. But the irony of it, of course, is that New Zealand plays cricket into April. We have done for years and years. I mean, I remember, it's a long time ago now, but I remember Sri Lanka played a series when Hamish Marshall was still on the side that went into like the middle of April. So in theory, there is room to shuffle things around. But of course, the reason why they can't do that is because New Zealand gets paid for its players to go to the IPL. So, which I didn't know, by the way, I only found that out recently. So, New Zealand cricket said no to South Africa for not releasing their players from a domestic competition, but then on the other hand said, well, we can't move it around because our guys are going to a domestic competition as well.
Yeah, and it is tough, isn't it? Because both sets of players on both sides will be in the IPL. Whether it's Rabada, I think the new kid Berger is got picked up in the IPL. Janssen, I mean, all their top players are going to be playing in the IPL. All our top players playing the IPL. So really, playing in late March or April doesn't work either. And I think this kind of just shows you the stranglehold that the IPL schedule is now having on international cricket. And even with the way the schedule works, you know, I guess another option might have been, say, early November. But, you know, the calendar is so condensed now that it's really hard to find room. And I think there would have been a reluctance on New Zealand cricket's part to postpone the series because it would have mean only 2 tests scheduled for the summer. I know Pakistan did something similar where they had a series scheduled against West Indies in February this year, or next year, sorry, I should say. But they have ended up postponing it due to the PSL.
Yeah, that's true.
So would New Zealand cricket have thought about going down that road? I mean, maybe.
Well,
but
we couldn't have played them in November anyway because we're in Bangladesh.
No. November next year,
Oh,
2024.
Yeah. Well, I suppose just before we finish though, that does beg the question, and it's something I've been thinking about quite a bit recently. Is that maybe there's a case, maybe it's getting very close to the point where we actually have a defined period during the year. Some people like to call it a window. I just don't like that word. But a period of time during the year